Wouldn't you like to have a gift that lasts a lifetime? Our guest today got a gift, and it will. Hello, welcome to Wordnet. I'm your host, Jack Knight. My guests today are Cathy Grinnan and her daughter Hannah, and they have a story to tell you that is just the most amazing thing I've heard in a long time. Welcome to the show today.
Thank you for having
What a
us.
pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.
And especially, I can see you're your mother's daughter.
That's what they say.
So, Cathy, we're talking about a number of things today. One is that the gift of life
Of course.
that God gives to us, and how sometimes that is interrupted by problems.
Right.
Now, I have on my driver's license that I volunteered to be an organ donor.
Thank you.
And Hannah, you know all about that, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Cathy, tell the story from that moment when you were pregnant with your 7th child.
Okay, yes. Well, when I was pregnant with Hannah, we did all the prenatal testing, of course, and since she was the 7th child, and all my children were C-sections because of a condition that I have, but so obviously they were taking a lot of care in a lot of things, and it turns out that when we had the ultrasound, they saw something particular that they didn't like. Of course, they didn't tell us at the time, but they sent us to a pediatric cardiologist the same day, and immediately, Hannah was diagnosed. Well, we found out that she was a girl, number one, and then she was diagnosed with a congenital heart defect, which is called Hypoplastic left heart syndrome. And basically what that means is the left side of the heart will never develop, and it is an underdeveloped, those two chambers on the left side actually pump oxygenated blood to the body, and the right side pumps it to the lungs. So to sustain life, you can't live without a functioning left side of, left ventricle. And so that was devastating to us, particularly at the time, because we had already in 1985 lost a little boy to hypoplastic left heart syndrome. And he was 2 days old, and he was not diagnosed prior to birth. But even if he had been, the technology and the resources at that time were not available to save his life. That was at a time, I don't know if everyone can maybe remember baby Faye, the child that received a baboon heart. And so that was shortly after baby Faye had received her baboon heart, and then 21 days later had passed away. So we were in a very precarious time. And so when we got this diagnosis once again, it was absolutely devastating because we didn't know what we could do and where the technology had gone.
Yes, because this was prenatal. This
Yes.
was before birth. Your other child, it was after he was born.
Mm-hmm.
And to find something on the spur of the moment, right there, how did that happen?
With my son?
No,
Or with Hannah?
With Hannah, yeah.
Well, the cardiologist, I think, not knowing that we had been through this before, he kind of flippantly said, well, my goodness, this baby has hypoplastic left heart syndrome. And he was saying it like we didn't know what it was, but of course we knew what it was. Yeah. And our first thought was it was a death sentence for our child. And so my husband was, he was in the room with me, and he was very upset, and we just, it was one of those, it was like someone saying your child is not going to die. And although she was still alive in me, it was like saying she was going to die, once she was born. So we kind of, gathered ourselves together, and this pediatric cardiologist said, whoa, we can do a couple things. You have 4 options. So we got very excited at that. We went, oh, well, before we didn't have any options. So what are these 4 options? Number 1, terminate the pregnancy. Well, that was not an option.
No.
Number 2, have the baby and take it home and hold it till it dies.
Oh my God.
Well, that was not an option. But they count those 2 as options for parents. And some parents do choose those options for whatever their personal reasons are. The third option was to really experiment on her with, at that time, now it's much better now, but at that time, with a procedure called the Norwood Procedure. And basically, it's where she has heart surgery, and they try to reconstruct the heart and kind of replumb it so that it semi-works okay. But in that option, there's a series of 4 operations, and there's a mortality rate of 50% each operation. So we would have, if we went that route, which we obviously didn't, each operation she would have, there would be a 50-50 chance she wouldn't come out of it. So that was our third option. Our fourth option was to, list her for a heart transplant. And at that time, they really, really discouraged that option because they said, there really isn't families that are donating infant organs. And so to not hold out for that option. So we were trying to take all this in, and they had sent us to some other specialists who had done this Norwood procedure. And we were asking questions, well, what are your outcomes, with this procedure? And we couldn't find a cardiologist after numerous that actually, in the state of Arizona where we were at the time, that actually had a good outcome where the baby survived. But they really did. We had one pediatric cardiologist say to us, if you can imagine, well, you have 6 other children, so this would be your best option. And basically what he was saying is, if this didn't work out, you have these other children. And I said, well, wait a minute. Are you wanting to experiment on her because we have other children? And he said, well, no, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you do have other children, and, some other families don't have what you have.
A small consolation.
So I didn't take that as very kind or a good bedside manner at the time. So we did leave his office, and we were trying to figure out what we were going to do. And luckily, my grandfather was a volunteer at the VA hospital in Loma Linda, California, and it was right across the street from the Loma Linda International Heart Institute.
Uh-huh.
And so he passed that building every day, and so he just walked in there one day and said, my granddaughter is having a baby. They say he's going to die if they don't do something. So luckily, Loma Linda took care of him and gave him a packet with, at the time it was a VHS video, and he sent it to us, and we looked at the video and we read through the information, and it was the first time that we really felt like there was some hope. And so this video was lovely pictures and videos of children who had received heart transplants that were playing in parks, interviews with their parents. And so it was really the first day that we felt like we had some hope. So this was on a Sunday, and Loma Linda, being a Seventh-day Adventist organization, they happened to be open on a Sunday because they're closed on their Sabbath on a Saturday. So we didn't have to wait till Monday morning. We actually got a hold of someone on a Sunday and started talking to them, and they immediately had us sign and send our records and her medical records, mine, to the Heart Institute.
So this is a whirlwind. This is so fast and so much to consider in a short time.
So much to do. And Even I was 18 weeks pregnant, so.
Yes. And your husband, how did he react to all of this?
Well, he was kind of a mess because when we lost our son, since I couldn't travel after having a C-section, they had flown our son to the children's hospital, which was in a different city, and he was the one that, held our son till he passed away.
Yes.
So of course he didn't want to. He was reliving all of that trauma for him, and I wasn't able to hold my son ever, and
What a shame.
so of course it was. But we were really, really super focused on that was in the past, and here's what we got to do. We have the clock is
So
ticking.
now you're living in Tucson, but you have to go to California,
Right.
and there's that back and forth that Bill had to do.
Well, we had to, before he even did that, we had to work out between the two medical facilities and the insurance and actually the insurance company at the time said, well, they do heart transplants in Arizona at the University of Arizona, which we lived in Tucson, and we were seen there, but they didn't have a surviving child. And so we had to we found a pediatric cardiologist who had taken care of some of Loma Linda's kids in Arizona. And he was really our advocate, and he worked with the insurance company and told them, a transplant costs what a transplant costs. It doesn't matter what state they're in. You want to go where this family is going to have the best survival rate. And of course, we had to take care of our own personal expenses.
Of course.
So he really was such an advocate for us and really got the insurance company to approve for us to actually travel to another state to, have the baby and be listed for a heart transplant.
Now, when you had the procedure done, how long were you in hospital?
So the C-section was scheduled, and so she was born, and thank goodness we were there, and we weren't somewhere else where we had to transfer her because she couldn't take her first breath. The left side of her heart was so underdeveloped.
Yes.
It wasn't like my son, where my son, they didn't find it till the next day because his left side was a little more developed.
Right.
And hers was severely underdeveloped. So they had to, really resuscitate her, and they did a procedure on her, which to this day, I even checked with Loma Linda recently, the procedure they did to her was a septostomy, and she's the only survivor.
We'll be back
Yeah.
soon. Stay with us. Boy, this is interesting stuff.
You have heard the traditional Veni, Creator Spiritus, Come Creator Spirit song. We do not know the author of this song. It is an invocation to the Holy Spirit, and it is sung in the Catholic Church during the liturgical celebrations of the Feast of the Pentecost. It is also sung during the ordinations of priests and bishops and at some solemn events. It is such a heavenly feeling and experience when we listen to it being sung in Gregorian chant. Father Mike Manning has written a booklet to understand this great song of praise. He takes the English translation of the song and explains it in detail, but in plain language. It will surely help you understand and pray with this song in praise of the Holy Spirit. We want you to have a copy of this booklet.
Call the number on the screen or email us. You can also order it through our website. Come, Holy Spirit, enlighten our minds and hearts.
We're back with Cathy and Hannah Grinnan with a story that is almost beyond belief. That's what I said, belief. Hannah,
Yes.
here you are, 21 years later,
Yeah.
with a smile on your face that's worth $1 million. I want to get a toothpaste commercial for you. Looking back now, when did you find out what happened to you?
The thing is I was always talking about it. It was never like someone, you know, they never sat me down and said, hey, this is what happened to you. It was always you know, my mom worked for American Heart Association. We would talk about the story. It was always something that I was hearing. And, you know, I was taking my medication and going to doctor's appointments, and I knew it was something that I was going to do for the rest of my life. And I knew that it was important because I knew when I would tell my story, people would just light up. And so I knew that it wasn't just something I would brush off. It wasn't just a task I would do daily. It's a lifestyle. This is my life. It's not, you know, there's a lot of heart transplant recipients that, you know, get a, you know, organ later on in life, you know, not when they're 11 days old. So sometimes they don't see sometimes they go back and forth, or, you know, what their life would have been like or could have been like or whatever. But I don't know what my life could have been like after, you know, before this. Or
Yeah, there's the things that you have to be aware of. I would imagine we hear so much about communicable disease, you know, and wash your hands and all that.
Exactly.
And you have to be careful about all of that.
Definitely, yes.
So tell us about that, what they call the routines or the things that you have to be aware of.
Right. So my medication makes my immune system really low in order to be compatible with my body. So so in that case, if I get sick, I get really sick, and that's just because I have a low immune system because of my medications.
And it takes her longer to recover.
Exactly.
So usually when someone gets sick, their immune system, the furnace, think of it as a furnace in a house. It ignites, it turns on. So the immune system will turn on to fight the illness, and so it takes her longer with the suppressed immune system. But what it also does, and this is why it's so important, and people have to understand when they're around an organ recipient, if they're sick, they shouldn't be, because when that immune system ignites, it's not only fighting the bug or the virus that they may have, it also fights their organ, because their organ will always be foreign, and our human body will naturally gets rid of anything that's foreign, even down to a splinter. If you get a splinter in your finger and you see it fester up,
Sure.
and it starts to come to the surface,
Yeah.
that's your body getting rid of a foreign object. So her heart will always be foreign. It is not her DNA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the
So-
psychological feeling is, I'm walking around with part of somebody else.
Yeah.
Did you ever have to face that with yourself?
I have, yeah. I mean, I mean, from as much as I can remember, you know, everyone has said, you know, oh, you have a boy's heart, or you have Trevor Frisch's heart, or, you know, I've always heard his name. I've met his mom, I've met his family, and I love him so much. I feel like I love him more than anything in the world.
Do you have a connection still with the family?
We do,
Everybody?
yes.
And where do they live?
Well, at the time of Trevor's birth, they lived in Bakersfield, California, and right now the family is in transition. They had to leave to take care of a sick relative, so I believe right now they're in Utah. But we, you know, we're on Facebook together.
Oh, swell.
Yeah,
We've done
definitely.
for the Rose Parade, when they had the Donate Life float, they worked on the float together, Hannah and Trevor's mom.
No
Yeah.
kidding.
And we always
Yeah.
made a promise to their family that when we talked about Hannah, we didn't want to just say her heart donor. We wanted to say his name, because he was a real person.
Sure.
And he lived and he fulfilled his purpose. And his liver went to a little girl who, her name is Maggie, and Hannah and Maggie are friends. So imagine that Trevor was able to save two little girls' lives.
Now, through school, when other people, other kids, your contemporaries found out you have, really? How did you talk about it?
I mean, you know, the funny thing is when I was in middle school, my teacher, I think it was my science teacher, he was like, oh, we're going to do this, you know, extra credit project. If you want to do, you know, you could bring in whatever you want that's science related, and, you know, you could get an extra, you know, extra credit for it. And I was like, okay. So I was talking to him about it, and I was like, I have this public eye video about my heart transplant, and he knew who I was because I had, you know, 7 siblings that had him. So he was like, of course, yeah, bring in the video. So, but there's a few friends that I've told, but I don't really like to say it off the bat. I like to people really get to know me.
She doesn't go up and say, hey, I had a heart transplant.
Right.
She wants to be, you know, what you would say normal. She wants to be Hannah. She doesn't want to be the kid with the heart.
Knowing all of that and realizing what a burden it was for your parents to do that, what do you look forward to do to maybe help pay it forward?
Right. I mean, honestly, I love talking about it. I love hearing people's reaction when I tell them about my heart transplant and about my story. You know, and I mean, and I know it's going to sound crazy, but I love being a patient. I love my doctors. I know it's kind of weird, but I mean,
people don't want to go see their
people exactly
doctor.
don't really. But I mean, the thing is that they're not only my doctors, but they're my family as well.
Absolutely.
They've you know, saved my life, and they're going to continue to help me save my life. And that's why when I go to Loma Linda, I love all my doctors more than anything. So whatever they tell me.
Outside of the situation,
right.
would you say you've been living a normal life?
I have, yes.
And what do you look forward to?
I mean, you know, maybe having a family one day, or you know, getting married, or.
And I understand that going forward, there's a possibility that there will be a story in film about your experience.
Yeah.
And tell us about that.
Well, we were just recently approached about 3 weeks ago from some producers that are now, of course, I think by now everyone understands that with the streaming services, there's a lot of content now, and so a lot of work for actors, and so Netflix has a lot of money to invest in original screening and stories. So the first week in March, I'll be meeting with some producers. I haven't written a book yet, and I had always planned to. I have outlines of a story, but there's so many, you know, branches to it, I'm not sure where to, you know, focus on. So in meeting with these producers, we're going to talk about actually going right to screenplay, and with them and myself writing a screenplay that they will then package up and put together, you know, for Netflix.
This could be so encouraging for people to see and to realize the value of volunteering, at least, to be an organ donor.
Well, absolutely, and I think everyone has a story, and sometimes you say, well, what do I have to offer? But I think out of respect for Hannah's donor, and out of memory for my son, and to honor the facility, Loma Linda University Children's Hospital, who took those steps back in 1984 to put a baboon heart in a baby, because before then, infant hearts weren't listed on UNOS. And when that happened, even though baby Faye passed away, she didn't pass away because she had a baboon heart. She passed away because it was an incompatible blood type. So because she survived her surgery, it's just shouted to the world that an infant can survive a heart transplant. And so after that is when they started listing infant organs for transplant. And so we're very fortunate of that event in 1984, because by the time Hannah was born, it had come so far to where it wasn't the moon where we were shooting for.
Good timing.
Yes.
Good timing on what
Yes.
that was. Could you just relate a couple of things about what people can do in the procedure to offer themselves as
You
donors?
bet. I would be happy to. Well, number one, I hope by now everyone or most people are educated on organ donation and to be an organ donor. And I would specifically say for parents, because in Hannah's case, her parents had to make that decision. You know, the parents of young Trevor had to make that decision. So if you have a child that's under 18, and at the hardest moment of your life, that child, you know, that child's sudden death, I think you need to, if you don't already have educated yourself on the organ donation process and dispelling the myths, then you really need to do that, because, you know, as you know, we never know. We never know what's going to happen to us, and you need to make that decision for your child and share those wishes, you know, with your family if you're over 18 and you want to be an organ donor. And what you can do if you're over 18, you can go to organdonor.gov, and that is a site, and you can find your state and find out how you can register to be an organ donor in your particular state. And what that does is you register, and it's legally binding. So your family cannot, after your death, your family cannot revoke that privilege that you wanted. So that's one of the easiest great things you can do. I would say another thing you can do on a regular basis is donate blood, because Hannah needed a lot of blood for her, you know, as a baby for her transplant, and liver transplants take a lot of blood.
I'm happy to say that I have donated over 70 pints in
Oh,
my time.
congratulations.
I got a little pin from the Red Cross,
Very good.
and I get a message every
contact
56
your local
days.
every 56 days. Good for you.
I want to thank both of you for coming in today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is, you are such a beautiful
Oh,
child.
thank you so
And
much.
the thought of even losing somebody as lovely as you turned out to be is crushing. Let's
Thank
say a
you.
little prayer.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Lord, I want to thank Hannah and her mom for coming in today. I want to thank you for the grace that she has received from you. What bigger gift can you give but the gift of life? And I also want to thank those people out there who could ask them to pray for you. And I'm going to ask them to continue to contribute to this ministry, and God bless us all.
Thank you. Amen. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Priscilla.
It's our pleasure.
Yes.
Our pleasure.
Keep smiling.
I will. Thank you. I will.